Happy evening, all my dear members. KSA is working continuously for the empowerment of CA fraternity. It has been organizing various seminars and webinars for the benefit of members for past 57 years or 60 years. So we have been doing these kind of sessions regularly for members. Today, Accounting, Auditing, Corporate Law and Allied Law Committee has organized a webinar on corporate law amendments and its impact on audit as a part of knowledge sharing to the CA community. For this session, I would like to welcome our today's speaker, Gaurav Pingle sir, for this session. Sir, welcome you, sir. I would also welcome our subcommittee members, Siddharth and Uma madam for this session. Welcome you both. And especially I would like to recognize our mentor, our committee mentor, Niranjan Prabhu sir, for coordinating with the speaker and connecting the speaker to us and making this event happen. So I would special thanks to Niranjan Prabhu sir. Thank you, sir. Now I request Uma madam to introduce our today's speaker. Over to you, madam.
Thanks, Gaurish. Good evening, everyone. It gives me great pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Mr. C.S. Gaurav Pingle. Gaurav Pingle is an associate member of ICSI and has completed Masters in Commerce. Gaurav brings in 12 plus years of practice and industry experience, advising on business setup in India, core company law matters from day-to-day compliance to advisory, transaction advisory, foreign exchange management laws, SEBI listing regulations, securities law for domestic, multinational and listed companies. He is frequently consulted by corporates, compliance officers, company secretaries, lawyers, chartered accountants on critical corporate law matters and interpretation issues in corporate and securities law, and he provides opinions on the same as well. He has authored books on Companies Amendment Act 2017, related party transactions, virtual meetings under Companies Act, which were well received by the readers. As an avid researcher, he religiously authors articles and dedicated columns on the current case laws, latest happenings in corporate law, and articulates his views, which are published in leading professional business journals. Many of his articles have bagged the Best Article Award. He authors dedicated columns and articles on corporate secretarial practice. He also conducts internal training programs and workshops for company law firms, CA firms, CS firms on topics relating to corporate law and corporate governance. Having a flair in teaching, he has been the visiting faculty of corporate law and investment and securities law at ILS Law College, Pune for 4 years now. He was also a visiting faculty at various colleges in Bangalore, Mangalore, and Udupi. He has been invited to participate and address many conferences, seminars, and workshops, study circle meetings, and training workshops conducted by ICSI, ICAI, management colleges, and law colleges. So we have got a great opportunity today to hear him. I hand over the platform to CS Gaurav Pingle sir. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Uma ma'am, for the introduction. Thank you, Gaurish sir, for the invitation, and Siddharth sir as well. Thank you, Karnataka State Chartered Accountant Association for the invitation. President CA Kumar S. Jagajani, Secretary CA Pramod S. Convener CA Deepabali Das. For the invitation. This is my first opportunity that I'm presenting before the Chartered Accountants Association, and I'm very much privileged to be part of this old organization, old and active organization for the Chartered Accountants. Where the where there are questions asked by participants on a real-time basis, and there is a discussion that goes during the session. Considering that we are all virtually connected now, I will try my best that I answer to your questions or your queries as far as possible, and I will try my best to make it interactive, at least one way or two way. Maybe like I'll try my best to ensure that the session
Gaurav sir, your network is disturbing.
Okay. So can I just switch off my video for some time?
No issues.
Okay. Yeah. This subject of company law is actually chartered accountant.
Sir, still having issue. Sorry to interrupt.
Okay.
Uh,
Okay. So just a minute. Just a minute. I'm there on the session. So I just join in just 5 seconds. Yeah. Am I audible now?
yes, sir.
Hello.
Yes, sir. Audible, sir.
Yeah. Am I audible now?
Yes, sir. Audible.
Okay, great. Yeah, this subject is something like, as I said, I was saying that the subject of company law is much close to a company secretary, just the way income tax and accounts and GST is close to the heart of a chartered accountant. With this, you can see a very small introduction to this subject. I would like to just also state that I hope everybody is keeping well, because this second wave is quite disturbing in the present situation, and I hope we take all the necessary precautions, and at the same time I pray that we are out of this present situation at the earliest. I hope next year this time, or maybe after 6 months, we are in a very different and a positive situation, and I really pray for that, and I really hope that we meet one to one at the earliest, and so that we can have more fruitful discussion for our subject. I will share the PPT just right away. Yeah, is it visible now?
Yes, sir. It is visible.
Okay, great. So even if I'm not visible, it's fine, but I think so the PPT should be visible for all. Okay. So basically, the purpose of today's presentation is that I discuss provisions relating to company law, but from the eyes of the chartered accountants, and I discuss which are you can say an impactful provisions which chartered accountants should keep in mind at least during statutory audit, or maybe not. You can say each and every provision that I'll be discussing something like Caro. But what I'm trying to discuss is the recent amendments and its impact on the statutory audit. Now, if you ask about amendments, then practically there is no, just like GST, company law and FEMA has become equally super duper active, I can say, in terms of amendments that have been introduced, especially because of this COVID-19 situation. So government has introduced quite a few schemes. They have introduced amendment acts. The first amendment act was in 2015, second was in 2017, then we had 2019, 2020, and it was notified in 2021. So practically there have been 4 to 5 companies amendment acts. Then simultaneously there have been amendment to the rules sections, to the separate circulars were issued, notifications were issued, circulars, clarifying circulars were issued. So a lot of things have happened in company law in the recent, I can say, 7 years, as I understand. In the company law was never such an active subject. It was, a very easygoing subject for all. But in the recent times, it has become very, very active. And this activeness of this subject is very much seen by we see quite a few headlines in the newspapers on the corporate law amendments. So what I'm trying to say, or what I'm trying to present today, the agenda for today's presentation is broadly around 3 to 5 or 5 to 6 points that I'll be discussing today. I'll be discussing the CSR amendments that was introduced by the Amendment Act. There is remuneration to independent directors, but I also know that there could be chartered accountants who would be dealing with, you can say, private companies or maybe small companies. So I will be also touching upon the topic of remuneration to directors of private companies. Maybe not from a limit perspective because there is no limit, but from the perspective of compliance. So that is one aspect. We'll also be discussing a bit about the virtual meetings, and I'll be discussing very less, but wherever chartered accountant is affected directly, I will be discussing that part. I'll be discussing the Companies Amendment Act also, wherever, but from the perspective of compliance, so that we understand the compliances and not very much from the perspective of penal provisions. And I have prepared one slide for the compliance calendar for FY 2021-2022. So like chartered accountants and professionals can just keep a tab of it. Generally, it is applicable to private companies and public companies, not for listed companies, but we'll be discussing this. So let's move on to the first agenda. Yeah, and also one more thing is, like there are broadly 4 topics. Compliance calendar is just one slide. So there are 4 topics. What I have planned for the presentation is that we will be discussing 2 topics now: amendments to the CSR provisions and remuneration to the directors. Then we'll take a small Q&A session on these topics or any related topic. After that is complete, then we will come to the third topic and the fourth topic, and then we will have a Q&A for all the 4 topics. So like that we can design the session so that there is less, because topics are wide, and your question should not be not connected to the discussion going on. So therefore I have purposefully bifurcated 2 and 2 for the today's presentation. Yeah, so let's go to the CSR. This topic, very frankly, of CSR was never interesting for me, but it has become very interesting in the recent times. The reason is because complexity in the provisions has increased, and there is a lot of interpretation, scope for interpretation in this particular CSR amendment. And interestingly, it touches upon the pockets of the company, and it also, there is a liability aspect to this particular non-compliance. Means now it is defined. Earlier there was a miscellaneous provision for the same. Just one more observation of my observation of company law is that there are few provisions which have been frequently amended, or you can say most amended provisions of the Companies Act. First, most amended provision of the Companies Act has been related party transactions, that is section 188. Another amended provision is CSR, that is section 135, and rules. Obviously, when I say section, rules made thereunder, and also the number of circulars and notification that keep on coming from the government. So we have section 188 related party transaction. We have section 135, that is the CSR. There is one more section, section 185, that is loans to directors, which is a very critical provision that was entirely substituted by Companies Amendment Act 2017, and it has now become an enabling provision. So that is one. And one more provision is there, is that of private placement of securities, which was also entirely substituted by Companies Amendment Act 2017. So these two provisions have been substituted in the previous law, but there have been also quite a few circulars and judgments also of the NCLT, NCLAT, SAT, Securities Appellate Tribunal, and SEBI on these particular points. So I feel that these three provisions are very vibrant in the company law. First provision of related party transaction is a provision where these are always seen from the Companies Act perspective, income tax perspective, GST perspective, accounting perspective. So it has SEBI LODR perspective. Then we have the CSR provisions, which were voluntary, and from voluntary to codification, from codification to making it mandatory, to making non-compliance and imprisonment, and if not an imprisonment, then now it has been, you can say, further amended. So that is CSR. And then there is another point. The third point is with respect to loans to directors. This provision is also a bit similar to the related party transactions, but in a different, you can say, different wrapping paper, or in a different form that we have related party transactions. So why CSR has been so much amended? CSR has been amended because government over a period of time has understood that implementation of CSR is a very critical aspect. And like, for example, to give you some broad examples, whether vaccination of employees by the company will be considered as a CSR activity. Whether developing a road within the company will be considered as a CSR activity. Whether branding or giving a marketing sponsorship to a particular event, sports event, will be considered as a CSR spending. Now, there is another aspect to that, whether CSR spending is tax deductible or not, and there are quite a few things to that. But that has government is very clear that there is no tax. You can say there is no tax exemption for CSR. So what I'm trying to say is that CSR has got quite a few provisions which have got implementation issues. Now there is one more provision where chartered accountants, we will come to that, where chartered accountants will be very much be, you can say, aware of these provisions, is that if a CSR activity is done through a Section 8 company or a trust or a society, then they should have a, you can say, a minimum working time of 3 years. They should be registered under Section 80G of the Income Tax Act. They should be registered under Section 12A of the Income Tax Act. So there are these particular points to that. Now this was earlier, but now the government has made it very clear about how do we go ahead. So I will be coming to that also in detail. So what I'm trying to say, there have been, what is CSR was a concern, what is 2% was a concern, what is net profit, whether before tax, after tax, was a concern. So government had issued a lot of FAQ, circulars, notifications, amendment in the rules, and they have been evolving over a period of time. So what I am trying to discuss in this part of the presentation is that I'm going clause by clause and I'm taking all the important points. Okay. There was one more issue in the previous prior amendment, was that if the company is going to spend more than 2%, whether that amount can be set off against the next year. There was no clarity. So whatever was said by the government, if you spend extra, it is your, means it is your choice, but you will not be allowed extra because set off, because there is no specific provision in the law. Now that provision has been included. Some small companies where, having a CSR committee is difficult, government has also said that, okay, you can do this through the board of directors, you need not have a separate committee. So like that, provisions have evolved for the CSR. So let's come one by one and let's discuss the amendments, the major amendments with respect to the CSR. Okay, so they have defined what is CSR now. They are saying that activities undertaken by the company in pursuance of its statutory obligation in accordance with the provisions contained in the rules. And more specifically, there is a reference to Schedule 7, that if you spend the amount in accordance with the CSR policy, and the CSR policy has got the areas of spending which is defined in Schedule 7, then that would be considered as a CSR expenditure. So we will come to certain clauses which they have specifically said, which is not CSR. Like any activity undertaken by the company in the normal course of business. This normal course of business and ordinary course of business is a very common term that has come in company law. I feel that this term is appropriate in Income Tax Act only, but now it has come to the company law. Company law, I can at least point out around 5 to 6 provisions where this normal course of business or ordinary course of business is mentioned. Basically, it says that you need to, if it is a social activity, you need to have a specific activity which is mentioned in Schedule 7, and you need to do it separately. But in the recent time, because of vaccine, they have said that if there are companies engaged in research and development, then amount spent on this will be considered for the purpose of CSR. So it is an exception to the exception. So it is a rule. Then we have the next point with respect to any activity undertaken by the company outside India. So CSR, the objective being that the Indian people and the Indian society should be benefited. So they have said that it should be only in India. But if a company sponsors any sportsman for its training outside India, then that would be considered as a CSR expenditure in India, right? So any sports personnel representing any state, UT or national level or India, that is at international level, training is outside India, then that will be considered as, like for example, there are countries like Germany and France where sports is an industry in itself. So in this case, it would be considered as a CSR expenditure. There are few companies in Pune, Bombay, and Bangalore which have this kind of a structure. Like, not to name any specific sports person, but there are sportsmen where such kind of spent is done. That would be considered as a CSR activity. So any political contribution will not be considered CSR. So it's good in a way that it is not a CSR activity. Then we have one more point as in activities benefiting the employees of the company. Here they have defined that here the definition of employees as per the labor code that they have introduced. So basically it says that if for the purpose of in the present situation, if vaccines are given to the employees by the companies, then that will be not considered as a CSR. I can give you a direct example what I've just mentioned now, that vaccination of employees and their families will not be considered as a CSR activity. I feel in the present situation, such restriction should not be the such restriction should not be the case. In fact, government should allow vaccination of employees. They should promote. But anyways, this is my view. Second is any activities of the company on the sponsorship basis. So if you are sponsoring and getting only marketing benefits, then that is not what is CSR. Now this is a very difficult situation to handle, but it goes case by case. Yeah, it is difficult to specifically say. So I'll just give an example for the purpose of this particular point. Let's suppose in the present situation, TCS is sponsoring the Mumbai Marathon till 2019, 2020. They were not 2020, but 2019 that they were sponsoring. And there are quite a few companies which sponsor this event. In my view, that should be considered as a CSR, but it is very difficult to say, at least prima facie it is not a CSR activity, but as we go in detail, probably it can be a CSR activity, because if you refer to the Schedule 7, in Schedule 7 it says promoting any sports activity, and running and marathon is a sport, so that should be considered as a CSR activity. Okay, and if we are just paying the provident fund and gratuity or making any contribution to any government fund, then it is a statutory obligation and it is not a CSR. Therefore, it will be out of the purview of the CSR. That is the point number 4 in this particular slide. So from this, we are clear that whatever is mentioned in section 135, rules and schedule 7, everything is CSR with just 2 exceptions. Everything is not CSR. Okay. Now, earlier the government had come out with FAQs, and now there are not FAQs, but now they are part of the rules. Yeah, one more aspect, like this is not something related to CSR only, but what has happened in the recent times is company law has become a delegated legislation where you have got rules, circulars, notifications, something more than what the section is speaking about. And very rarely I say that you first need to read the rules and then go to the section. It is always vice versa. We first read the section and then go to the rules. But CSR is one such provision where I always suggest that you first read the rules and go to the section. So what we are referring right now is the rules, and then we'll come to the section. Okay. Sorry, I forgot to mention this at the time of presenting, but this is how we'll be going forward for the present presentation. Yeah, they have introduced, they have amended Rule 4 specifically in relation to CSR implementation. The rule name itself is CSR implementation. And let's go to this because this affects chartered accountants' work, and especially in the recent times where 12A ATG has become, you can say, after every 3 years we have to renew. I'm not a very specialist in income tax, so please pardon me if I go wrong. But as far as I remember, understand, they have introduced this 3-year criteria for renewing the registration. So let's go one by one. What basically the provision says that a company can do CSR on its own, or CSR can be done through an entity. Okay, if the company is doing this on its own, then there is no question of getting registered anywhere. Okay, like for example, a company is giving an amount directly to a school for setting up certain classes, maybe laptops or computers that they are setting up, or maybe they are providing it for setting up or building a toilet in the school, anything like that. Okay, so it is directly to the school, so there is no specific issue of implementation. But if company engages few other companies, if company engages a trust society or a section 8 company, then there are certain ifs and buts, and this is where the rule 4 of CSR rules becomes applicable, and this is where chartered accountants have also got a role to play in the present situation. So let's go clause by clause because this is not a very clear cut and an easy interpretation as I understand. It says to ensure that the CSR activities are done by the company itself or through, if it is established, a company is established under Section 8 or a registered public trust or a society, and they all are registered under 12A and 80G both. Okay, and they have either formed it singly or jointly. So there is a corresponding provision about this in the Act. It says that 2-3 companies can come together and form all these kind of entities. There is no restriction. They can do this, but only thing it should be 12A and 80G registered. Then only they can do this activity. If it is not, then there is an issue, and probably they have to find a different way through which they can do this activity. Okay, so 12A and 80G has become mandatory for this. Now, interestingly, just to give you a reference, here there is no criteria of 3 years activity. To give you a reference, there is a criteria of 3 years in the last clause, but there is no clause over here. So the moment you get 12A and 80G, even if you have not completed 3 years, that entity will be considered as a recognized entity for CSR implementation. Okay. I'm not able to see the participants and the reaction for this particular interpretation, but I presume that they have understood. But if you have got any questions, please drop in the questions. If it is established by, you can say, central government or state government, then it should just be a Section 8 company registered trust or a society. 12A and 80G is not applicable to them. Okay. If it is an entity established under the Act of Parliament or state legislature, there is nothing about registration, there is nothing about 12A and ATG. Okay. So practically in our day-to-day working, we will come across entities which are falling under 1 or 4. Okay. So it may happen if a company is registered under 8, section 8, a registered public trust or a registered society. Yeah, it should be registered under the Income Tax Act and having a track record of at least 3 years. So here you need registration under Income Tax Act, you need registration under its respective acts, and you need a track record of 3 years. So what is going to affect the companies, individual companies? Like for example, just an example, the company which I am taking is not a very realistic example, but just for the purpose of explanation. If say Infosys is giving an amount to Infosys Foundation, or it is giving an amount to a particular hospital, then probably these provisions may not be specifically applicable. But if Infosys is routing its CSR through a Section 8 company and then going to the beneficiaries, then in this case, it should be through a Section 8 company or a trust or a society registered under 12A or ATG, having a minimum track record of 3 years. So this is what this section is trying to state. If IT companies in Bangalore or maybe Mangalore or maybe in some other areas in Karnataka come together and they form a company, all these companies form a company, then in that case 12A and ATG registration would be required for that entity, whether it is a Section 8 company, trust or society. So this now what if you have got this entity? So you need to check with your clients that how they are doing CSR, through whom they are doing CSR. And most importantly, once you have identified whether you are falling under 1, 2, 3, 4, any of the entities, then you need to get it registered. This is an amendment that has been introduced from 1st April 2021. So what they are saying is every entity who intends to undertake the CSR activity shall first get registered with the central government. Now to this form, there is a certification of a practicing chartered accountant, company secretary or CWA, anyone. So we need to get this, we need to get these documents and then only we can apply for registration. So we get a unique CSR registration number. The purpose of this implementation and all this registration is that government wants to monitor these entities, is what I understand. This is written nowhere, but if they are mandating all this, then probably the objective is that they get monitored by the government, so that there is no siphoning of funds or mismanagement of funds. So probably they are having this kind of a structure. Yeah. So I think there was one question that was asked. I will definitely take that question. But if there is any other question in relation to this, you can just drop in the question. Okay. You can do CSR, you can engage an international organization for designing and monitoring the CSR projects. That is possible. You can collaborate with other companies that we have already discussed. Yeah, point number 3 on this particular slide is very important because this point number 3 is where the role of a CFO is highlighted. And to be more specific for the participants, the amendments were introduced on 22nd of Jan 2022 or 2021, 22nd of Jan 2021, and they were effective immediately. So the issue was with certain companies with whom I work, that when is it applicable for the present year, that is present financial year at that point of time? So is it applicable for 2020, 2021? That was the issue. And in my opinion, since the amendments have been notified and it has been notified somewhere during the odd time of the year, not at the start of the year or the end of the year, but somewhere in the month of Jan, the provisions were applicable. So when you are auditing the accounts for the present financial year, you have to keep in mind all these amendments. So this amendment or the presentation is not an academic exercise for you all. Okay, so now there was one concern of a company, a listed company, that what is the responsibility of the CFO? Because if you see the present amendment, it says that the board shall satisfy itself that the shall satisfy itself that the funds have been disbursed, have been utilized for the purpose in the manner approved by it. And we have the CFO or any person responsible who shall certify to the effect. Now, how do they certify? So they asked me a question when they were emailed me a case for opinion. They said that how do we certify? And it was a very tricky situation for me also. But practically, the CFO is required to understand section 135 and the rules very thoroughly. He needs to go through the CSR policy. He needs to go through the CSR probably minutes of meeting. He needs to understand to whom the power has been given. He needs to ensure whether the entities are registered. He needs to check the invoices for the same. He needs to confirm the budgeted expenditure and the actual expenditure. He needs to check if there is an unspent amount. If it is an unspent amount, then whether it is for an ongoing project or another, not an ongoing project. If it is for an ongoing project, then whether the accounting treatment has been made. If it is not for an ongoing project, whether the provisions will be applicable, how the provisions are applicable and how the compliance is made. So there are a lot of things the CFO should ensure when he is taking care of this CSR project. So quite challenging, and the government has passed on the buck to the CFO to certify it. So what I also feel is that this particular amendment is also good in a way, because firstly it brings in accountability in the company, either by way of a CSR implementation that we have just seen this part, or it could be the monitoring and certification by the CFO. So based on that, all these documents and information, I feel he can be more comfortable for certifying that they have been properly disbursed. Okay. So this is you can say some part about the amendments that have been introduced. Yeah, this is one more administrative overheads. What happened was, I'll give you a very practical example. A company formed under the old act, the provisions of CSR were applicable. That is the turnover, net worth, and the criteria with respect to the net profits. So the three criteria, one of that was applicable. So it was there. So the total spend that was required to be done was 2% of the average net profits of the previous 3 financial years. Okay. So if it says that previous 3 financial years, and in one of the financial years there is a loss, then you need to average out the loss. Okay. So take an example, they had 50 lakhs as the net profits for the first year. They had 150 lakhs as the net profits for the next year, and they had 20 lakhs loss for the next year. So you need to average it out, divide it by 3, and 2% of the net profits, that will be the amount for which it can be sent. Suppose, take an example, the amount comes to 15 lakh rupees. So the companies used to appoint a person, they used to appoint a staff in the CSR department and pay salary up to, say, something like, they used to pay a salary somewhere around, say, 8 lakhs, 10 lakhs a year. So out of 15 lakhs, 10 lakhs were spent on the salary, and they had hardly 5 lakhs. And when it came to 5 lakh spending, the company used to say, we are not spending because there is a cash crunch, there is a loss, or there is something like that, and we don't want to spend. Now what the government has done is that they have put a cap on the administrative overheads. They have said that you can only spend up to 5% of the total CSR spending or the CSR expenditure of the company. So if a company has got 15 lakhs, then only 5% of the 15 lakhs can be used for admin overheads. Okay. So it is something like an allowable CSR expenditure, non-allowable CSR expenditure. Now, this is also to be ensured the compliance when the CFO is certifying this compliance. with respect to the 5% of the total CSR expenditure. So quite stringent or quite important that they have made this particular point with respect to this. Now, the heart of CSR spending lies on or lies in whether the project is an ongoing project. Okay, and we will come to this. Ongoing project, as the word says or as the phrase says, it is ongoing for a period of more than 1 year. Okay, and government has said that it is ongoing for a period not exceeding 3 years, but it will exclude the year in which financial year in which it has commenced. I will give you an example because this issue had come up to me for you can say some advice, obviously without disclosing the name of the company. The company was doing a CSR activity through the registered entities for quite a few years, religiously that they were doing. Like there is no non-compliance, in fact over compliance, and ensuring proper spending on the resources. Now they had few entities through which that they were doing the CSR spending for schools and certain colleges. Now there was certain amount which was going to be spent or going to spill over a period of say 1 year or 2 years, right? And they asked me a question somewhere in the month of Feb that suppose if we have a spending in the month of Feb that is there that we need to spend the amount, but we are not able to do it, what is the impact on the compliances? And that is the point where the financial year of 2020-2021 was not considered for the purpose of ongoing projects. It will be considered from 2021-2022, 2022-2023, and 2024. These 3 years will be considered. So if you have a project which starts in this financial year, then the present financial year will not be counted for the ongoing project. Okay. So this is the heart of the compliance with respect to CSR. And this is where we need to apply the spending also. So I'll come to this point. CSR spending. We discussed this point. Every board shall ensure, this is part of section 135. The board of every company shall ensure that the company spends in every financial year at least 2% of the average net profits made in the 3 immediately preceding. Everybody knows this. I'll not go into this. And wherever it is a local area, you need to give a preference to a local area. Please don't misunderstand. There is no reference of registered office over here. It is only local area or where the company has got operations. So if a Chennai plant is having operations in Himachal, then spending an amount in Himachal is also CSR. Okay. If a Bangalore-based plant is having a plant in Pune or in Bombay or somewhere in the somewhere in between, then even spending that amount in that area will be considered as CSR expenditure. So it is a very area specific. Wherever you operate, you need to spend. That is the intention of the government. Now, this third point is very critical. And this is where the ongoing project has got a reference. So where is ongoing project defined? Ongoing project is defined in the rules. And where it has got a reference? It has got a reference in the section. And this is the section. Okay. Now, it says that if a company fails to spend such amount means 2% of the average net profits, then the board shall report that they have not spent. Earlier, the section was to stop over here. If you are not able to spend, explain. Okay. But now it says that unless the amount relates to the ongoing project, transfer the amount, that is the unspent amount, to a fund which is in schedule 7 within 6 months. Now this is where the crux comes. I'll go by numbers because I'm talking to chartered accountants and I can make it more presentable there. Suppose the spending is to be done of rupees 15 lakhs. Okay. Company has spent 10 lakhs. 5 lakh is not spent. So suppose if the company is utilizing or is having an ongoing project, okay, then there is a separate treatment. Okay, separate treatment of 5 lakhs. But if the company is not having an ongoing project, means it is having only a stable project or a standard project or one-time project, which is not an ongoing project, then you need to transfer this amount to the funds which are mentioned in Schedule 7. Now there are funds which are mentioned. Like for example, we have got PM Care Fund that is mentioned. That is Clean Ganga Kosh which is there. Then there is you can say Prime Minister's Relief, Disaster Relief Fund. There is one fund over there. So there are funds which are mentioned, around 5 to 6 funds, 3 to 4 funds that have been mentioned in the Schedule 7. So what you need to do, you need to transfer this within 6 months from the expiry of FY. What it actually means, you need to transfer 5 lakh rupees to the funds mentioned in Schedule 7. Only when there is not an ongoing project. Okay. If there is an ongoing project, then there is a separate compliance. And that is what we will come to now. Yeah. I'll just come to this slide in just 2 minutes, the slide number 12. We'll first go to slide number 13. Any amount unspent, remaining unspent, which is the 5 lakhs in our case, pursuant to an ongoing project, then you shall transfer, that is the company shall transfer that 5 lakhs to a separate bank account, and that bank account should be designated as unspent CSR account. And for the next 3 financial years, you can use that amount. Okay. Now just take an example. In the next financial year, you spent 1 lakh. In the next financial year, you spent 2 lakhs. And in the next financial year, you spent 1 lakh. So out of 5 lakh, you have spent how much? 4 lakh. 1 lakh which is remaining goes back to the fund. Are you understanding? So you spend today all amount, government is happy, you have complied with 2%, great. You have not spent 2%, then check whether it is for an ongoing project or whether it is for a one-time project. If it is for one-time project and unspent, transfer it to the fund. Okay. If it is for an ongoing project, transfer it to a bank account. Okay. Now, basically, what the government is trying to do is that they are making you spend 15 lakh rupees by hook or by crook. Okay. That is 15 lakhs. Whether you spend 15 lakhs or you open a separate account and you put the amount and you spend. So it is now, how was the compliance earlier? It was a compliance like comply or explain. Comply means comply with 2% or explain that you have not spent 2%. That was the status earlier. Now it has been comply or transfer. So comply means either comply with 2% of spending or transfer to the CSR fund or a separate bank account. But ultimately it means spend. Okay. So CSR spending has become mandatory. Okay. Now they say that, suppose, now just taking the example forward, the company is required to spend 15 lakh rupees and the company has spent around 18 lakh rupees. So can they carry forward the 3 lakh? They have used the word set off, but grammatically it is wrong. It should be carry forward. But anyways, can you set off or carry forward? Answer is yes. You can carry forward. Only thing, it should not be an activity or surplus arising out of the CSR activity, and the board shall pass a resolution. Board will be happy to pass a resolution because ultimately they are getting it for the next financial year. Board will be happy for that. Okay. So I hope you all are understanding what I'm trying to say when it comes to the CSR spending. Now this is all about CSR. That's it. Practically, the Amendment Act is complete over here because we have discussed the Amendment Act in relation to Section 135. We have discussed the rules, amended rules. We have discussed ongoing project and transfer to the fund. So we have discussed this spending, excess spending. We have discussed this unspent amount, and in case of default, this is more critical. Suppose the company defaults. So what could be the possible defaults? Company has not spent 2%. Company has not transferred to the you can say the fund which is mentioned in Schedule 7. Company has not transferred to the unspent account. Company has not spent the amount from the unspent amount. Company has failed to transfer the amount from the unspent account to the Schedule 7 fund. It could be any non-compliance. Okay. If there is a non-compliance in this, then the company shall be liable for the amount, twice the amount to be transferred to the fund or the CSR account or 1 crore, whichever is less. So take an example. In the present situation, company was required to spend 15 lakhs. Company has spent 10 lakhs. Company has not done anything for 5 lakhs. Company will be liable for 10 lakh rupees. That is 5 lakh into 2 times. That is 10 lakh rupees. And officer, he will be liable for 1/10 of the amount. So he will be liable for say 50,000. 5 lakhs multiplied by 1/10 will be 50,000. That will be considered for the constraint, or 2 lakhs, whichever is less. So that is how the penalty will be calculated for the purpose of CSR. Okay. Now please also understand there is a reference over here which says about penalty, and penalty is only in the case of adjudication where a show cause notice will be issued. So the government will be monitoring this, and wherever they find that there is not full compliance or not adequate compliance, they will issue a show cause notice. Yeah, the non-requirement of so when you don't have to form a committee, is like you are not going to spend more than 50 lakh rupees on CSR, then you can dissolve the committee. In short, you can dissolve the committee, or you need not have the committee. Everything will be done by the board of directors. This is better, I feel. In case of company and the threshold is less 50 lakh rupees, then you can do it by the board. Everything will go to the board, which is fine, which is not difficult. But going every time to the CSR committee, then to the board and all, that all can be avoided. Yeah, they have also introduced one more point about impact assessment. Now, impact assessment is basically like it is like an MCQ to be taken after today's session. Like, what is the impact assessment of today's today's presentation? So they are all, the government is also saying that okay, you have spent an amount, now we'll do an assessment of it. So the company is required to do this, but it is not for all companies. It is saying that every company having a CSR obligation of 10 crores or more, then they need to do this. 10 crores means 10 crores is just 2%. 200 crores when the amount is there of the net profit, average net profit, then the provisions are applicable. So the high threshold, and they need to spend the amount on the impact assessment, and the board needs to report it in the director's report or annual report. So in companies undertaking, they can book expenditure towards CSR. So if you are paying a fee to the individual or the agency, independent agency, then you can pay up to 5% of the total CSR or 50 lakhs, whichever is less. And you can claim that as a deduction for CSR. You can book it under the CSR expenditure. Then the board shall disclose. So there are disclosures. I'm not going into disclosures because once if I go into disclosures, it will be a lecture for company secretaries and compliance officers. I'm just ensuring that I am addressing chartered accountants and just making it relevant for the audience. Rest everything you can get it from the you can say the rules, but this is the crux of the CSR. So if there are any questions, I will be happy to answer. We will just quickly come to one point, which is the independent directors, and then we will take some questions. So remuneration to independent directors. Independent directors basically are the directors where they are not related to the promoters. They have been appointed by the company, by the shareholders, uh, generally to protect the interest of the minority shareholders, seeing from the perspective of the company, seeing from the perspective of the shareholders, seeing certain decisions being taken in the interest of minority shareholders. So all these provisions are the provisions which relate to the independent director. Just a brief background about independent director. So private company is not applicable. Public companies it is applicable beyond the threshold. Listed companies it is mandatory. That is what is the CSR, the independent directors all about. Now, what used to happen that if there is a company, public company, now I'll be discussing only about public companies for just next 3-5 minutes, and then I'll come to private companies. So in case of public companies, whether listed or unlisted, if the net profits are not up to the desired numbers, then you can say that you have got inadequate profits or you have got a loss, and you can pay the executive directors or managing directors, and you have got a schedule for that. The payment of the remuneration depends on the net worth of the company, which they call it as you can say they call it as the effective capital. Okay, in the schedule. But now what has happened is the government has observed that if there is a you can say a loss or inadequate profits, then independent directors are only remunerated by way of sitting fees, because you cannot have commission, because commission is on profits and company doesn't have profits. So they have introduced a provision for remuneration to independent directors in the case where the company is a loss-making company. Okay, so this is what the provision is all about. Just a background before we start. So here they have said that this is section 149 where the provisions of independent directors are mentioned. So an independent director shall not be entitled to ESOPs, but he or she may receive remuneration by way of a sitting fee or reimbursement of expense or any profit related commission. If a company has got no profits or inadequate profits, they can pay in addition to the sitting fees an amount which is being mentioned in Schedule 5. We will come to that Schedule 5. And they have also said over here, there is now, this is section 149, this is section 197. So here they are also saying that if managing director or whole-time director or manager are paid for inadequate profits or losses, then even the NEDs and independent directors can also be paid in accordance with Schedule 5. Now they amended this particular provision in the month of March, and they have made it applicable. Now on similar lines, they have said that non-executive directors or independent directors can also be paid a remuneration. So effective capital, again same thing, it is dependent on the effective capital, only the threshold is different. Only thing, in my view, this is per director per year fees that he can get in case of a loss or inadequate profit. So, but it depends on the net worth of the company, but it can be done. That is basic provision under the Companies Act. So this is also, if the net worth is negative or 5 crores, they can pay 12 lakhs to the director. That is for the entire year per annum. It is 5 crores to 100 crores, they can pay up to 17 lakhs, and up to 100 crores to 250 crores, they can pay up to 24 lakhs. Now you would be basically asking that why all this is being discussed in today's session, because if we see the Caro, whether it is the old Caro or the new Caro, there is a specific provision where the chartered accountant is required to mention whether the company has complied with the provisions of payment of remuneration to its directors, and more specifically under 197 public companies. So that is one. And CSR also, if you see the new Caro, there is a reference of CSR pending, unspent amount, and the ongoing projects and the funds that is to be transferred. So these two provisions are very important for today's presentation. There is one more point which I would like to, this is not part of, you can say, the slides, but there is one more point with respect to the remuneration to the directors of a private company. And we all know that there is no specific limit whether the company is into profits or whether the company is into loss. There is no specific threshold for paying the remuneration to the directors of a private company. However, I always feel, though there is no specific provision, it is always desirable that that you as a chartered accountant ensure that there is a resolution passed to that effect about the payment of remuneration, how much remuneration has been paid, because we have got several provisions where the company can give a loan to the director, where a company can accept a loan from the director, where company can pay remuneration, a company can pay commission, company can pay sitting fees, even in the case of private company. But it is always desirable that all this is recorded and approved, and it is part of uh, the minutes of the board of directors, and it is approved in accordance with the articles, if at all there is a provision. So considering this, I feel that even in the case of a audit of a private company, these you can say these issues are specifically asked by the statutory auditors, that how these payments have been done, whether the board has approved the same. I personally do this for my company on a regular basis, for my companies, client companies, that I keep a tab, I keep a watch. I ask them now. To give you a very practical example, there are few clients who are also connected, maybe on some social media forum like LinkedIn, and they put over there that he's a managing director, co-founder, CEO, CTO, CFO, some kind of a technical designation. And I always tell him that this is correct. Probably you as an entrepreneur can do this, but you have to also ensure that you have been appointed like that by the company. So you need to be appointed and you need to present itself. Otherwise, we have got a concept of a principle of doctrine of indoor management. So that should not get triggered. So all these checks and balances we as professionals have to ensure for the proper compliance of the company. Now we have the next part, which is the virtual meetings. But before that, we can just quickly have some question answer if there are any, so that you can means we can just
Yes, sir. We have a few questions here. So,
okay.
first question is, I'm taking you back to the CSR implementation rules. The
Okay.
question is, what is the difference between clause 1A and 1B of Rule 4? Is it only the track record of 3 years in undertaking similar activity?
Yeah, it is the track record. It is
Okay.
the track record. Yeah. So that's what I was just discussing that point, that if you are referring to clause A, where maybe I'll just quickly refer that. Yeah. The first part says that if it is done collectively by companies, then there is no reference of track record. If it is done independently by a company, by through a trust, then Section 8, then it requires a 3 years track record. So track record is the only distinguishing factor.
Okay. Second question is on eForm CSR. Form CSR mandatorily applied by all companies or only new companies?
Means actually, I've not understood the question. It is applicable to all companies, or
So whether all companies have to file eForm CSR, or is it only applicable to new companies which are getting registered now?
okay, yeah. No, it is applicable. So suppose it is a company incorporated in 1990, but it is doing a CSR activity through an entity, registered trust society or a Section 8 company. They need to even get it now. Means I'm saying this company is a private company or a public company, and they have 3 other entities. So they need to get this through the. It is applicable to them as well. It is not applicable to only new companies, all companies.
Okay.
So just
The
to
next
give some
question.
background,
Sure.
sorry, just to give some background, basically they are saying that whenever you are doing it through any entity, you need to get registered. Whatever is your history or background, that is not the case. Suppose a company gets incorporated in 2020, 2021, that is the last year, okay? And it is applicable to them from day one because of whatever reason, whether net profits or capital or turnover. It is applicable to them from day one. In that case, they need to have these entities registered, if at all they are doing it through the trust society or a Section 8 company. Yeah.
Very well, sir. So the next question is, should a certificate be obtained by auditor from CFO separately?
A certificate, actually, there is a provision in the new rules where he is required to give a declaration in the annual report, and maybe there is a specific provision, but I don't think specific declaration is required because everything will be audited by the statutory auditor. So I don't think a separate certificate is required because there is in the amended rules. I have not taken it as a part of presentation, but there is a provision which says what the CFO should certify. Means they have prescribed one draft format for that. So I think so auditor can rely on that. If anything plus minus is there, then he can ask for that. But I think that is sufficient.
Probably by way of a management representation letter
Yeah.
or something would
Yeah.
suffice.
Actually, the challenges means I understand the challenges for the statutory auditor, but the real challenge is there for the CFO also.
Right.
That how to certify all that.
So the next question is on CSR expenditure. So this is on the cap of 5%. Does it mean the total amount actually spent or to the extent restricted to 2% computation?
I think that is, I think so they are asking in relation to that 5% of admin expenditure. I'm just
Right.
referring to that part. Yeah, so it says admin overhead. So to 5% of the 2%. So if say 2% of the net profits comes to say 10 lakh rupees, then 5% of it can go to the admin expenditure, admin overhead. So 5% of 10 lakhs. So I think so it will be 50,000. That can go to the admin expenses.
Got it. So the next question is related to unspent amounts. The question is,
Yeah.
is there a requirement of transferring to a separate bank account or a specified fund of unspent amounts pertaining to the financial year prior to FY 2021? What is the position of the unspent amount of these previous years?
Okay. See, this provision is applicable in my view, means not in my view, but the notification it says that it is applicable from 21st of Jan 2021. So just take an example. In 2020, there was an amount which is of say 5 lakh rupees, which is unspent, and in 2021 there is an amount which is of 7 lakh, which is unspent. Now, if it is 7 lakhs, then it will obviously include 2 lakhs plus 5 lakhs. So that 7 lakhs will be the amount that will be required to be transferred to the account. Now, there is a provision under the amended section 135 is that it should be transferred to a separate bank account, which should be unspent special account, unspent CSR amount, and considered for the purpose of, so separate bank account is required. It is, I'll give you an example, an analogy. It is like a dividend. Okay, I pay the dividend today, but nobody claims it. Okay, so it is transferred to the unspent, unclaimed dividend account. Nobody claims in that dividend account for 7 years. Then it goes to the IPF. Okay. Similarly, you spend it today, you transfer it to the unspent CSR account. You have got 6 months, depending on whether it is ongoing project or anything like that. And then if it is not done there, then you need to transfer it to the funds. Only timelines will change, but analogy is the same. Objective is that you take out the money from your financials and put it somewhere else. You earmark the amount, in short. That is as I understand.
Okay. So the next question is on compliance requirements. So if any company donates to any private trust which is registered under Section 8, does the company again need to file something after giving the donation?
Yeah, only the CSR 1 form that they need to file for registration.
Okay. So the last
Yeah.
question is if you can give some examples of ongoing projects. If you have any live examples of your clients.
Yeah, sure. See, for example, there are few companies which sponsor a particular course. Like for example, they are sponsoring a course of say you can say students who are for a particular age group, like they'll be sponsoring for 8th standard, 9th standard, 10th standard, or they'll be sponsoring for 10th standard, 11th standard, 12th standard. So you can consider it as an ongoing project, because that is how you are going to spend the amount on the specified number of students. It can happen that the company has entered into an agreement or an understanding with the Section 8 company or a school, where they are going to spend an amount over a period of time. So they say that we are going to spend, say, 20 lakh rupees for setting up some infrastructure in the school, but this will be staggered over a period of time. So not all 20 lakhs will be spent today. We will be spending over a period of time. There are few companies in India which are registered specifically, or they enter into some agreement with the other party, and they even the quite a few statutory auditors also ask for this kind of understanding, that how you are going to spend, because I know that there are one or two things about GST credit and who pays and who gets and all that. I'm not as a company secretary, I'm not very conversant with that, and but I am just aware that there was one recent ruling of AAR on this CSR spending, and they said that you can also take the GST credit of it. I'm not aware of the details, but I think so it was of Rajasthan AAR on the CSR spending. So what I'm trying to say is that you can have multiple projects. Like for example, there is one company which is sponsoring some sports event of for a mountaineering company in Pune. So that mountaineering company in Pune is very recently they just completed the summit of Annapurna in Nepal. Now next year they are going for another summit. In next year they have already you can say completed the summit of Everest in their first year. So they have got ongoing projects every year. This season, April, May, they go for a project, and in the interim time they need funds for buying certain equipments and some infrastructure for this. So it could be an ongoing project. And most importantly, defining ongoing project is something which is a bit discretionary for the company also. So company can also define it that it is ongoing. There are just one or two conditions, but you can define it as it is ongoing. So defining is not a problem at all for a company.
I think those were all the queries, sir, pertaining to CSR. We can move ahead with the next.
Okay. Great. Yeah. Is it visible now or no? No,
Yes,
I'm
it
not
is.
able
It
to
is
check.
visible. We can't see the PPT.
Okay. Just 1 minute. First, I should stop the video. Yeah. Okay. I think it is visible now.
Yes.
Yeah. This we have discussed. Yeah. Okay. Great. So there are few questions, and I'm very happy to have these questions. I'm not saying it as a part of a formality, but definitely these questions are quite interesting. I'll just question, and I will just one question which I got very recently in one of the seminars was that there is an impact assessment. They are saying that you can for some specific amount you can claim an expenditure up to a certain amount. But if a company is doing voluntarily self-assessment, impact assessment, self-assessment of that CSR, then whether they can claim that amount as expenditure as CSR? Answer is no, because there is no specific provision for that. Maybe in the next round of amendment, we can have that amendment, maybe by the government, but that is how presently is the situation. Anyways, we come to the virtual meetings now. Practically, I will not be taking this subject for a very long time, because this is not the place where the chartered accountants are very, very actively involved, but they should be aware of. Therefore, I'm just taking this part. And it is also a close topic to my heart because I've authored a book on this topic. Yeah. So there are 4 pointers which you can't conduct in a board meeting through VC. But now they are saying that yes, you can conduct even if you don't have quorum, and this is till 30th of June 2021. And I think the government will take it forward and they will amend this and make it till 31st of December 2021. There was a recent news in the business newspaper that government is thinking of removing this provision itself. They are saying that now we are so accustomed to doing things in a board meeting through VC that approving this or having this in a specific provision now not required only. So probably they may remove, this is rule 4 of the board meeting rules. Okay. So approval of financial statement, board report, prospectus and audit committee meeting. So point 1 and point 4 are actually interconnected. But yeah, so this is it. They may, I'm sure that considering the present situation, they may extend it. Yeah, AGM through VC is already permitted up to the end of calendar year. EGM, that is extraordinary general meeting, is allowed to this June 30th. And depending on the present situation, it can be further extended also. Certain disclosures are to be mentioned. It can be sent by way of an email to all the members, including the auditors. So there is a provision, I think so there is a provision under section 146 also, where there is a mandatory requirement of serving certain documents on the statutory auditor. That is also there. This provision has not changed. So that is this provision is still there. Section 145, not 140, yeah, 145 and 146 is the relevant part. Then it says about public notice. In certain cases, we have to publish a newspaper notice also. And companies which are not required to provide e-voting shall share the email address. So they can have a email address for the purpose of contact. Whenever we are having this AGM or EGM through VC, it should be a two-way teleconferencing, just like today's presentation. Like though I am there through video, if there is any other participant, he can also participate through video. So that is one aspect to it. Transcript audio, it is to be preserved by the company at least for a period of 1 month. Companies which are not required to provide e-voting facility, they can provide a designated address. The independent directors and statutory auditors are mandatorily required to attend the meeting through VC, but section 146 is more applicable, or not more applicable, but it is applicable. We have to read this clause in relation to section 146. So if an auditor is not able to attend the meeting, then he can, and even his junior is not able to attend the meeting, having a requisite qualification, then there could be a specific communication from the company that they can they are exempted from attending the meeting. So that provision of 146 is still applicable, but you have to read it in relation to this particular meeting. Chairman, he should ensure. There is one important point over here in this last point, is that after the AGM or EGM through VC is conducted, there is a requirement that we report it to the registrar of companies within a period of 60 days that the last point has been complied with, that all the provisions of the circular have been complied with. So there is no specific form that is given, but the company can file in MGT 14 that form, or they can do that in you can say in GNL 2, just to intimate the ROC that they have complied with the relevant provision. So that is it. That I have not mentioned over here, but that is a very important compliance, which is probably, I'm not saying that may be skipped, but in the all the situations, we have to ensure that particular compliance. Yeah, we come to the amendments specifically in relation to the Companies Amendment Act 2020, and we will be discussing more practically. I'll not be discussing only the amendment, but I'll be discussing some relevant provisions in relation to that amendment. So let's take one example. The definition of listed companies is being amended. So I will give you some background to this particular amendment. In the Companies Act, there are there are several occasions where there is a reference of a public listed company and there are references of a listed company. Okay. Now, practically, we have always learned that a listed company is always a public company. But there are occasions under Companies Act and SEBI regulations that you can have a private company which is a listed company. And because of that, for the purposes of provisions of Companies Act, such private company becomes a listed company. If it becomes a listed company, then provisions of independent director, secretarial audit, company secretary, and many other provisions which are not applicable to the can say a public company or a private company gets applicable to the listed company. So what the government has done, they have said that certain class of companies are not listed companies. Okay. Now, in that, they have also said that it is not only private companies but also public companies. Now, to give you one more example, there are certain companies in India where the equity shares are not listed, but its debt securities or preference shares are listed. Only those shares are listed, but not equity. So the traditional thinking of only equity shares are a listed company is now gone. You can have equity shares unlisted and you can have preference shares which are listed. You can have equity shares unlisted and you can have debentures which are listed. And what happens is that listed means listed in any security. So when you say security, the meaning of security is very wide. It includes shares, scrips, bonds, debentures, anything. So therefore, in this case, they have said that certain class of companies will not be considered as a listed company. These are all interpretation issues and these are all grammatical issues which ought to have been rectified long back, but are now being rectified now. No problem. So what they are saying is these point number 1, 2, and 3 are not the listed company. So if there is a public company whose equity shares are not listed, but NCD is listed under the SEBI regulation, or non-convertible redeemable preference shares are listed, then it is not a listed company. Okay. If there is a private company, again the NCD is listed, then it is not a listed company. And if there is a public company, like to give you a very relevant example, again not my client but just an example for the purpose of example, that we recently that Zomato company converted from a private company to public company, and now all these startups are proposed to get listed on the stock exchange, foreign stock exchange. They will be going not through BSE NSE but direct to NYSE. So what they are saying is that if there is a public company which have not listed their equity shares on a recognized stock exchange in India, but whose shares are listed on a foreign jurisdiction, even they will be considered as a public company, but not a listed public company. Okay. So like this, they have made the amendment. So this is one aspect to the particular point. Yeah, again, the same thing. If you have got any questions, you can just drop in the questions. Then there is the offer period. This is very important for all the offers made for a private company, public company, Section 8 company, any company. So what they are saying is that you need to make an offer of minimum 15 days and maximum 30 days. Okay. But the law says that this 15 days in case of private company, why required? You can keep it for a shorter time. So now the amendment says that you can have it for a lesser time. So to give you something maybe that you can think of is that suppose you are opening the offer today, that is on 20th of April. The offer will be open from 25th of April to 30th of April. You can keep it now because you can have anything, an offer period not less than 7 days, which shall be made and shall not be less than 7 days. So maybe 7 days. So from 25th of April to say 3rd of May, you are having that offer. You can have that small offer. You can have a lesser offer period also. In case of private companies, if you take the consent of the members, you can have it even for 1 day or 2 days. That is also possible. So like that, the offer period gets reduced. So, but please understand, this is only in the case of rights issue. That is under section 62, and this is not under section 42. In fact, I have also observed, this is maybe if there is any professional who can correct me, you can tell me. Under section 42 for private placement, there is no time period of opening offer and closing offer. How you have got it for section 62, which is for rights issue. So you can open offer today, you can close the offer tomorrow. That is also possible in the case of section 42. Yeah. So this is what is the amendment that has been introduced for the rights issue by the Companies Amendment Act 2020. Sorry, 2020, 2021. Yeah. Then we have one more point. Certain companies like banking companies, NBFC company, they're exempted from filing section MGT 14E form. Certain unlisted companies shall now be required to prepare and file periodical financial statements. But just checked it today morning. The rules have not been notified as of now, but they will be notified soon by the government. This will be half yearly reporting. Basically, what the government is trying to do is that they are trying to make unlisted public companies accountable. To give you some background, in 2017, 2018, somewhere in the month of September, the government had introduced a mandatory demat for shares of a public company, unlisted public company. So they have to mandatorily get the shares in demat form. And if you don't get it in demat form, then there are certain restrictions as a company. So unlisted companies, there are a lot of transfers which take place, not recorded, not complied, and there is probably siphoning of funds in certain occasions. So government is becoming a bit stringent about unlisted public companies. Amendments relating to CSR, this we have already discussed in the previous part. So what I'm trying to focus over here is only compliance related to amendments, not the decriminalization. The focus of the Amendment Act was on decriminalization of certain offences. Wherever there is a higher fine or there is imprisonment for minor non-compliances, there was a provision for imprisonment. Like for example, proxy not complied, there is imprisonment. Or there are some provisions which you don't comply, there is direct imprisonment. Or you have got a remedy under a separate provision, but there is a penal provision as well. So what the government has done is that they have introduced a bill where the provisions of minor non-compliances or procedural lapses have been eliminated, and instead of fine and imprisonment, they have introduced the concept of penalty. So penalties of now, so when they say penalty, it is all subject to adjudication by the adjudicating officer. And anybody above the rank of ROC or anybody above the rank of ROC are entitled for issuing the notice under adjudication. So that is the brief background about the provisions of the Companies Amendment Act 2020. Yeah, this is just a compliance calendar for your reference. This PPT will be shared with by me to the association. They will be uploading it on the portal. So this is a broad compliance calendar. There could be certain exemptions. That we need to conduct a board meeting on a quarterly basis. Therefore, there is a reference of board meeting at each basis. But in case of private companies and Section 8 companies, they have been exempted. But I have not made it very complex compliance calendar, just a foolproof compliance calendar that I've tried to make. Any form that was filed, which was a delayed filing under the previous in the previous year, under the company fresh start scheme, we need to file form CFSS, and the last date is 30th of June 2021. So if you file this form, then you will be protected from the non-compliances which you filed in the last year. From May from March 2021, 2020 to December 2020. So we had that window of 9 months where the CFSS scheme was there. So we need to file this immunity form. This is not CFSS, but this is CFSS immunity. So along with humans who are fighting for immunity and humanity, we have to also file the form for immunity of the company, so that the you can say the no prosecution or no action is taken by the ROC. There is also one form, that is DPT3. This is in relation to the exempted deposits or deposits under the Companies Act. So Rule 2(1) relates to the exempted deposits of the deposit rules, and we have to file it on or before 30th of June. Now, problem is that we are practically undergoing the second wave of the entire India, I can say, not the world. But there is no scheme or there is no exemption given for compliance. So I feel that this is a bit means there should be some exemptions, at least not exemptions, but at least extension of the compliances. So let's try and let's get those, because the CFSS scheme was very helpful last year, and it helped quite a few companies in updating their records. Yeah, we have got past 6. This is a form that is to be filed 2 times in a year, 60 days from the end of quarter, but it is applicable to unlisted public companies where they are holding the shares in demat form. Then we have got a board meeting in the next quarter. Generally, this board meeting, July, August, September board meeting is accounts approval meeting, where the accounts are signed and then forwarded to the statutory auditors for the signatures. Compliance of directors KYC. Yeah. So KYC, in fact, presently quite a few professionals and me have started the compliance of KYC. This is OTP based. Yes, sorry. Then we have to conduct the AGM of the company, and we have got the post AGM formalities, that is balance sheet and annual return. I have not considered any extension here, but if there is an extension, we have to consider that also. Yeah, sorry, coughing, so not well, a bit. Yeah, and in the last 2 quarters, we need to conduct the board meeting. Yeah, also would like to touch upon the recent amendments introduced in OPC. These amendments are applicable from 1st April 2021. Now, what they have done is, just to give you a background, they have reduced the criteria of 180 days to 120 days. They have reduced the they have eliminated the thresholds with respect to conversion of OPC into private company and private company into OPC. You can convert OPC into private company any point of time and private company into OPC. So this provision is there. Rest, nothing has changed. Only Indian citizen and resident in India can incorporate an OPC. Nominee shall also be there, and he should also be resident Indian. Resident criteria is mentioned over here. Only one person can have one OPC, and only one nominee can be one nominee in one OPC. So broadly, this is the criteria. But now there is one more point here, which is the same. They have not changed the same. An OPC cannot be converted into Section 8 company or vice versa. And the OPC cannot carry out the business of investing. The OPC should be only for business or services other than investing. So voluntary conversion is gone, thresholds are gone. So this 2 crores and 50 lakh criteria is gone. So we can incorporate an OPC and then convert probably even on the next day, because there is no specific criteria. I'll discuss this part of small company and then we will have another question answer session. Small company is basically a private company, paid up capital not exceeding 50 lakhs and turnover not exceeding 2 crores. However, following are not small companies, even if they are private companies: holding company, subsidiary company, Section 8 company, and a company under the Special Act. So practically, if there is a group of companies and there is a holding company is a private company, and the paid up capital is less than 50 lakhs and turnover is less than 2 crores, still it will not be a small company because it is a holding company. And subsidiary company also loses its status as a small company because it can be a company. Now, when does all this become important? Is at the time of certification, is at the time of the certification of e-forms, applicability of CARO, applicability of certain provisions of the Companies Act, exemptions from certain provisions of the Companies Act. So therefore, at this point of time, understanding the concept of a small company and private company becomes important. Now, to give you one more example is that like there was an amendment introduced to the provisions of merger of small companies and startup companies very recently. Now, even such companies cannot take the advantage. Such companies, that is, the small companies, can only take the advantage, but holding subsidiary company, they cannot take the advantage of this particular provision. So, ensuring that it is a small company. I will also like to bring your attention to one more point in the definition of small companies. Because as chartered accountants, you deal with numbers. This probably would not be very difficult for you, but you can just keep it in mind. If you see the paid up capital criteria, okay, this has not got any cutoff. Paid up capital which does not exceed 50 lakhs, that's it, and higher amount of 10 crores, but not notified. And turnover as per the P&L account of the immediately preceding financial year. So for turnover, you have got a cutoff, but for paid up capital, you don't have a cutoff. So paid up capital, anytime you breach, the condition gets triggered. And for turnover, you have to always take the previous financial year. Okay, so that is the point with respect to the, and importantly, both conditions are to be satisfied. That is paid up capital and turnover. There is no amendment specifically, means there was an amendment, but I've captured the amendment. But there is no any more amendment to these provisions in the recent times, because small company and OPC, the definitions were amended by the announcement in the Union Budget 2021, and therefore these are applicable from 1st April 2021. Yeah, then we can have another round of Q&A. Means the presentation from my side is over. Yeah.
Okay, so before we go to the questions, like you mentioned that we are in middle of second wave of COVID, and we do not have any extensions from the government as yet. I think we as an association will have a representation placed before the relevant authorities to extend the timelines if there arises a need to do that.
Yeah, great. If you need any help in that, any representation or any input, I will be happy to assist you.
Sure, sir. Thank you. We have one question, sir. This is in relation to the effective date of the amendment, specifically on the definition of listed companies.
Yeah.
What would be, yeah.
So what would be the effective date of amendment?
Correct.
Okay. There is it will be since there is they have not see if we see the definition of a small company and OPC, there is a specific mention of 1st April 2021 for any amendment, whether it is even CSR. There is no, they have not defined a future date. Okay. So unless as per the General Clauses Act and interpretation of statutes, if there is no specific date mentioned, then the date of issue of circular or notification will be the date on which the provisions are applicable. So for listed company, I am not specifically aware of that circular or that notification. But if that is the case, then it will be applicable from that day itself. And
Okay.
they have been notified.
We have a question, more of a clarification that has just come in. It says
Yeah.
small company means a company other than private company.
Yeah.
However, in this
No,
slide, it
other
is
than,
mentioned as
sorry.
public.
Yeah. Small company means a company other than public company. So it is, when it says other than public company, it means a private company.
Okay.
Means I have mentioned in the slide, just referring to it. Small company means a company other than a public company. So it is other than public, it is a private company.
Okay.
Means since we are all on the laptop and the question with respect to the listed company has come up, which is a very relevant question. Just give me 1 minute. I'm just on my laptop and going to the definition of a listed company where they have introduced, so that I can answer the question properly, not just just for the sake of answering the question. There is one rule 2A that they have introduced. Sorry, not just 1 minute. Just ensuring that I answer properly.
Sure, no worries, sir.
Yeah, listed company, they have said this is defined in section 2 subsection 52, and there is a clause which has been introduced by the Amendment Act, and there is a proviso that has been inserted, and this is effective from with respect to listed company. It has been inserted. It has been inserted by this. It is from 28th of September 2020, and they have mentioned in the circular, notification, amended with effect from 22nd of Jan 2021. Okay, so I understood the question. Very frankly, I understood the question. It is the Companies Amendment Act was signed by the President of India on 28th of September 2020. Okay, but it is not that only the signing is done and it is effective. The government issues another circular and another notification, and then it is made effective. Okay, so here in this case, the government has issued another notification that is on 22nd of Jan 2021, and then it is effective. So this provision is effective from 22nd of Jan 2021. Now I can say this with some confidence.
Okay.
Yeah, 22nd of Jan
Thank you.
2021. So this is how,
Got it.
very frankly, yeah. So this is how company law has become. Like it takes some time. Therefore, I said at a particular point of time that this amendment is till today evening, today afternoon, or I checked today morning, because God knows today evening there would be a circular and probably the discussion would go in a different direction tomorrow.
Definitely, it's very dynamic.
Yeah. Nobody thought that company law would be so dynamic. It was, quite, you can say, a easy law to comply, not a very complex law, but it is becoming complex day by day. And I sometimes feel bad for the chartered accountants because they have got complexity in income tax, they have got complexity in GST, they have got complexity in company law, and they have got complexity because of COVID. So they have to manage so many things that it becomes difficult. Now, other than that, if any chartered accountant firm is involved in some SEBI related provisions or insurance or anything like that, then that is a completely different thing. So there are just challenges all around.
The larger point that I'm taking away is that you mentioned that you read the rules first and then the section, because we are always accustomed to read the section first and then the rules.
Yeah, but that I do only for CSR.
CSR.
Because in CSR there are many provisions which says as may be provided, and now as may be provided, you have to read about the rules. So if just for the purpose of means what I do is that if there is a particular provision which says as may be prescribed, then I first read what is prescribed and then I go to the section. So if you see section 185, which relates to loans to directors, there is very less which says as may be prescribed. Everything is given in the section. So I don't read the rules. But if you see section 186, which relates to loan, investment, guarantee, security, there is something which is given as may be prescribed. So you need to read that also. Even in section 188, there are several occasions where it says as may be prescribed. In fact, section 188 is a topic in itself. There is one section, subsection 1, and there are 5, 6 provisos, exception to the exception, exception to the exception, exception. So it's just, and one day I was referring to the Income Tax Act, some section 56 that I was referring to. And I found that, why we means sometimes why am I cribbing that, company law is complicated. Income tax, it's just complicated. I was seeing the definition of income one day and I got tired. Like company law is okay, means I can manage that. Income tax is very complicated.
True. Well, thank you so much, sir, for taking time and explaining the provisions of the Act so well. And I think it was a great interactive session. And I hope the clarifications will be helpful for the members. Before my closing statements, in the benefit of the participants, I would like to mention that the PPT used in today's discussion as well as the video shall be uploaded on the official website of KCAA. If any of the participants wish to access the information, you are welcome to go ahead and download the material from the website. With that, now I would like to take the opportunity to thank the speaker, CS Gaurav Pingleji, for giving such an insightful and interesting session. I am sure that the session would have clarified many questions arising in mind of our participants, and we all have been benefited immensely, I'm sure. And we thank you for taking out time, and we hope that we have a pleasure of hearing you again, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, yes, thank you. Thank you, KSCCA and all the organizers. Thank you, Niranjan sir, and all the managing committee, Usha ma'am, Siddharth, and Gaurish sir for the coordination. Yeah.
And I would also like to take this opportunity to thank our KCAA President CS Kumar S. Jigni ji. I would also like to thank our mentor Shri Niranjan Prabhu sir. It would not have been possible without you, sir. I would also like to thank CA Gaurish Bhargavji, Chairman of the committee, for empowering us to organize such webinars. Also thanking CA Deepavali Das, our convener, all other members of the committee. I also wish to thank our technical team to extend their support for the online platform and making it seamless for us all throughout. At last, I also want to thank all the participants of today's webinar for actively participating in the session and making it a success. Thank you, sir, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, and take care of your situation.
Thank you, Gaurav sir. Thank you very much. Thank you, Siddharth. Thank you, Uma madam. Thank you all participants.